We now have official confirmation that everyone involved in Sunday's big backstage brawl has indeed been suspended by AEW going forward and will not be present tonight on AEW Dynamite. This includes the people brawling, but also producers, bystanders, etc. CM Punk's AEW future is reportedly very much up in the air, and he could be about to exit the company. We'll have all of this, all of the details in this ever-evolving AEW news story. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. And I said that it wasn't going to be the only time I talk about the situation with CM Punk, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Ace Steel, etc., their futures, possible suspension with AEW. I said that we did the video earlier today and it was suspensions with a question mark. Now it's suspensions with a full stop, because we know exactly what's going on, and it has been made official that everyone involved, including producers, including talent relations people, have all been suspended. And CM Punk's future with AEW is very, very, very much up in the air right now. Nobody involved in the brawl will be at Dynamite tonight, and we have all of the details. So let's get straight in to the latest details surrounding this ever-evolving and explosive AEW story. So it was first reported by Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated, got the scoop on this one, or was first to really go fully on record in saying, actually, yes, everyone involved has been suspended and investigations are ongoing, essentially. So again, this stems from CM Punk, who spoke at the post-match press conference this past weekend. He took, as Sports Illustrated describes it, a flamethrower to the AEW locker room, laying into fellow wrestlers, specifically Hangman Page. He also, of course, laid into the company's executive vice presidents, that being Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. He also laid into Colt Cabana, detailed his history or lack thereof in the last decade or so, stemming from their lawsuit from WWE doctors, to then Colt Cabana suing CM Punk over legal fees and Punk countersuing, all in the presence of the AEW president himself, Tony Khan. And Punk, it was wild. It was absolutely wild. Now, as the story goes, if you're not familiar, once Punk exited the press room, he exchanged words in a locker room with these EVPs he'd just run down, Kenny Omega and the Bucks, which then led to a physical altercation. Now, this is where the new details have emerged today, and we have official confirmation on the ramifications of what happened when it comes to that incident. Punishment for the backstage fight, Sports Illustrated is reporting, will include suspensions for every single person involved. Now, this includes the people, as I mentioned, that were actually trying to actively break up the situation too. So the list of those receiving suspensions includes Kenny Omega, Matt and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, but also Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, Michael Nakazawa, and Brandon Cutler, who it's been widely reported were there, or at least attempted to try and defuse and break up the situation as it was happening. They are all suspended. So once again, that's Kenny Omega, Matt and Nick Jackson, Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, Michael Nakazawa, and Brandon Cutler have all been suspended by AEW and will not be present for Dynamite tonight. Now, multiple sources, according to Sports Illustrated, have shared that Punk and Ace Steel will either, and this is where it gets critical here, will either be among those suspended or will no longer be with the company by the end of today, that being Wednesday. Once again, multiple sources have shared with Sports Illustrated that CM Punk and Ace Steel will either be among those suspended, joining Kenny Omega, the Bucks, Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, Michael Nakazawa, and Brandon Cutler being suspended from the company, or they will be gone. They will have exited All Elite Wrestling for good, and that decision is going to be made today. By the end of today, we should have a much clearer indication as to the futures of Ace Steel, of course, longtime producer for AEW, friend of CM Punk, trainer of CM Punk, and most importantly, we'll also have an update, hopefully, and more clarification on the future of the AEW World Champion with the company. By the end of today, either CM Punk will be suspended or he will be gone from the company. Now, what is really, really interesting about this story and the reporting that Justin Barrasso is doing for Sports Illustrated here is this last little bit he says when talking about the punishment for all of these people involved. So he says, quote, Punk met with AEW owner Tony Khan on Tuesday, that being yesterday at the time of recording, so the two had an opportunity to discuss how that exit could be handled. That is the key critical part of that. Let me say that again. Punk met with AEW owner Tony Khan on Tuesday, so the two had an opportunity to discuss how that exit could be handled. So to me, I look at this, I read that and I say, okay, all of those people have been suspended. Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, Michael Nakazawa, Brandon Cutler. And frankly, those people that were trying to break it up or diffuse the situation, them being suspended, is a little bit harsh, but also you could argue that they're all involved in this. They're all involved in this because certainly people like Brandon Cutler, Michael Nakazawa have friendships with Omega and the Bucks, so does Pat Buck and Christopher Daniels. It's their job as well, Pat Buck and Christopher Daniels, these newly promoted people in talent relations, to make sure incidents like this don't happen. They're not doing their job properly. However, they could push back to Tony Khan and say, you're not doing your job properly as well because you're meant to be leading this company. You're meant to be setting an example. You're meant to be laying down the law and setting discipline for all of these people, regardless of how big of stars they are or not. You're meant to be leading this company, and you've shown a total lack of leadership for this entire situation, but everyone involved is suspended. The key thing is, CM Punk, as of right now, is not suspended. He will not be at Dynamite tonight, but he is not suspended. The reason he hasn't been suspended is because he met with Tony Khan yesterday, and they're figuring out, is it even worth suspending you, or do you want to go? And I think that's the situation. That's what it says here. They're discussing how that exit could be handled. Because the problem is, it's not as simple as firing CM Punk at this point. Because he's the world champion. Now, we could be looking at a situation where Tony Khan is saying, right, you have to do this, you have to say this, you have to do X, Y, and Z, otherwise you're gone. And if Punk says no, then he'll go, okay, unfortunately we can't do business, then you're gone. There could be a situation when it comes to contracts that Punk's guaranteed all this amount of money. What happens then? He is the world champion. What do they do with the world championship? All of this is way up in the air right now. And whilst I am glad, certainly, I am glad that we've got a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit more of clarification on this situation. There is still a lot we don't know, especially when it comes to the outcome. But for the main people involved, they are suspended. CM Punk, it's up to try and find out, is he or isn't he going to be with the company anymore? And if I had to guess, honestly, if I had to truly guess whether or not he's gone, I find it very difficult at this stage how he could stay. But also you could say, what has he done worse than Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks? I suppose saying the stuff to the press, his behavior in general is totally unprofessional. And it does depend too, and maybe this is why this is going to take a little bit longer. It does depend too on, who threw the first punch, who initiated this. You could argue CM Punk initiated this because in front of the assembled media, he totally ripped apart the AEW EVPs, wrestlers, the company, journalists. He did all that, so he initiated it. But if other reports are accurate, that the Young Bucks stormed to his dressing room and kicked the door down and Matt Jackson threw the first punch, then we're looking at a bit of a different situation. And frankly, that isn't behavior that is becoming of an executive vice president of the company anyway. So when it comes to Punk and his future, we should know more by the end of today. Ideally, you would think probably by the time Dynamite goes on the air. Because if CM Punk's no longer with the company, by the time Dynamite goes on the air, we might look at a situation where they crown a new world champion. Maybe. And that could be Jon Moxley, who we know is booked for Dynamite tonight. Moxley wasn't initially planned to be on the show. Neither was Chris Jericho. But because of what happened at the weekend, and because of all of these talents now missing the show, Tony Khan had to call up some people and say, I need you for the show. We're light. Suddenly, that big roster they have looks a little bit thin. Now, it doesn't stop there when it comes to the ramifications and the outcome of this incident at the weekend. Per sources, once again, talking to Sports Illustrated, an external third-party investigation will be conducted. Page had already left the building, that being Hangman Adam Page, Sports Illustrated is reporting, which explains why he was absent from this altercation, which for him and his AEW future isn't a bad thing, because he's going to be there tonight. He wasn't involved in the altercation, so he's not suspended. He's going to be on television. And you would argue, whilst, again, Hangman wasn't involved in that altercation, so he shouldn't be suspended, but he's involved in this. They're all involved in this. Hangman went out on television and said something, went into business for himself, went off script. That's part of all of this. And it's not enough to suspend him, I agree. But did he get fined for it? Was there any blowback on him? Was there any ramifications from Tony Khan? Because not just everyone involved in the incident, but everyone involved in this giant mess should be punished. And I guess by not having them available, Tony Khan is then punishing himself too. Because all of it is just totally unprofessional and totally out of hand. And it is reminiscent of WCW, but were there even incidents like this in WCW? I mean, I recall, the odd interview where maybe Hulk Hogan would say something to the media, burying someone on the roster. I guess that's kind of a similar situation, but it's just all complete madness, And as I mentioned, it's absolutely crazy. So that's the latest when it comes to Sports Illustrated. They were the first to break the story, and it's since been confirmed by other journalists and other outlets. One being Dave Meltzer, who really. And you've seen these videos, if you've seen the other videos that I've done on the topic, Dave Meltzer's side of things is very clear to see. He's clearly talking, I would think, to the Young Bucks side of things, which again isn't a shock or a surprise. Dave Meltzer has very, very, very close ties with All Elite Wrestling. When there's an issue in AEW, he can pick up the phone in the middle of the night and call up Tony Khan, and Tony Khan picks up the phone. Because it's Dave Meltzer. So every time Dave Meltzer reports something about AEW, it's pretty accurate. Because he's hearing it from the proverbial horse's mouth, or if he isn't, he's hearing it from the Bucks or people close to them. And he has said, quote, "Everyone involved in the brawl is now officially suspended. Bucks, Omega, plus Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, Brandon Cutler, and Michael Nakazawa. Ace Steel was also taken off, and by off he means the road. Ace Steel will not be at AEW Dynamite tonight doing his regular producing duties. And Punk's situation should be clear soon. It's all pending the completion of the investigation." Now, I would think as well, again, those people that were suspended, i.e. Pat Buck, Christopher Daniels, and Brandon Cutler, them being suspended, my perception is, whilst it might not be totally fair, again, they talk about this investigation, and I think it's from a legal perspective too. In incidences where you haven't actually done anything wrong. If this was an office, if this was a corporate environment, right? And a load of people got physical with each other and people were trying to break it up. This tends to be what they would do. To me, this sounds like the AEW lawyers getting involved and saying, suspend everyone. We need to do an investigation. Nobody that was even involved in any of it can be stepping foot inside of the AEW arena tonight. They can't. Because we could have major legal ramifications. Because if, and again, this is a really interesting point too, if, say, CM Punk does get fired and he sues AEW for loss of earnings or for an unsafe work environment or whatever, and then it gets to, a civil trial, and then they say, oh, you suspended everyone, but these people, they were involved. What's going on there? All of it, they're trying to cover their bases here because AEW knows they could be in quite a lot of legal trouble, depending on how this goes, depending on who stays and who leaves the company. It's all incredibly messy. So that's the latest from Dave Meltzer. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful has also posted an update saying, quote, "Suspensions almost all round. Kenny Omega, Young Bucks, Brandon Cutler, Pat Buck, Michael Nakazawa, Christopher Daniels. CM Punk's situation still isn't clear. Ace Steel also off the road, per AEW sources and Sports Illustrated." Now, he also does provide some clarity about what I just speculated on when it comes to why some of the other people were suspended. And he said, quote, "I would imagine some of these are pending an investigation. Because, as we have documented on these videos over the last few days since the incident happened, there are wildly different versions of the same incident here. Depending on which side you talk to, depending on who you talk to, depending on, how accurate or how first-hand the information is, which a lot of the time it isn't. It's second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth-hand information or rumors or whatever. We were getting really varying different accounts of the story. Think about it. We're hearing CM Punk through the first punch. We're hearing Matt Jackson through the first punch. We're hearing the Young Bucks kick the door down. We're hearing that they didn't kick the door down. We're hearing Ace Steel's wife was in there. We're hearing that Ace Steel's wife has a broken leg. We're hearing Ace Steel pulled someone's hair or he bit someone. There are so many different varying accounts that I think AEW themselves are thinking, well, the best thing to do is suspend everyone. Once we get a determination of actually what happened, or as close to a determination as to what happened, then we can start looking at, do we need to fire people? Do we need to let people go? And when it comes to CM Punk, maybe he's already made his mind up. Maybe Tony Khan's already made his mind up. Because ultimately, what Tony Khan is working out now is probably 3 different options. One, like a WWE tag team, can they coexist? Can they put this behind them? Can they work all of this out? Can I mediate something so that we can just move on? And ultimately, it's pro wrestling. Can I make money out of this, right? Because if everyone could put their differences aside, God, the money they could make. Are you kidding me? The Elite versus FTR and CM Punk right now, it'd be box office. It won't happen because I think the egos here are just way too big of everyone involved. But he would be thinking that option. Can we find a way for everyone to figure this out? And I don't think that's the case. Then he has to make a decision. Does he let go the Elite? Because if he lets go one of them, if he says Kenny Omega, you're fired, which I think would be an odd person to pick, but if he said Kenny Omega, you're fired, the Bucks are going. If he says the Bucks, I'm letting you go, or Matt Jackson, I'm letting you go, Nick's going, and Kenny Omega's probably going too. Or does he let go CM Punk? Does he let go someone that is proving to be a difficult character to some in AEW, but also he is one of their biggest box office attractions. Whether you want to say CM Punk has been a success in AEW since he arrived just over a year ago, he has done record business in certain incidences for the company. He's broke merchandise records. He sold out the United Center. He did the highest ever rating for Rampage, and that show's dead at this point. He did do the first $1 Million House. He has been on pay-per-views where they've been up from the year prior, or have done record pay-per-view buys for the company in its short existence. Like, Punk has been beneficial for AEW in that instant, and you would look at other people on the roster. Are other people on the AEW roster capable of doing the numbers that CM Punk has done for AEW? And maybe in Tony Khan's eyes, it's no. So he has to balance it out. Does he let go the people that have been with him since the start and are EVPs, but they're EVPs in name only, but they're executive vice presidents of the company? Does he let them go? Or does he let go the world champion, who's also done good business for the company? But also, clearly, there are issues, not with his character, but there are issues with heat, and there are issues with his perception of other people in the company. That dressing room, just in general in AEW right now, we can easily say this, is unbelievably toxic. And there are some massive, massive egos that think they know better. There are some massive egos of a lot of people involved that don't want to get on. And frankly, from an outsider looking in, I think it's laughable. It is laughable. And as I've said a million times recently, the days of AEW like they were in 2019 being this plucky upstart company that they might not be competition to WWE, but they're an alternative, and they're giving other people a chance to come and work, and we're going to be different, and we're going to have creative freedom, and this, that, and the other. They are just like every other pro wrestling company now. Politics, division, fighting, bitterness. It's pro wrestling. That's exactly what it is. And as I mentioned, the most guilty person involved in all of this is the president of the company, the owner of the company, the head of creative for the company. Because for too long, he's been trying to do it all by himself. He's been trying to wear a million different hats, and nobody can do that. Look at Vince McMahon. Look at Vince McMahon throughout his entire 50-odd years he was with WWE for. He always had his minions. He always had his minions doing certain works, whether it was talent relations, whether it was creative. He oversaw everything, but he had people doing those jobs for him, because you can't do it all. You can't, especially in the world of pro wrestling, especially in pro wrestling when there is politics and fragile egos. And ultimately, when you're the boss, you need people beneath you to be the bad guy. You need, those people in talent relations. And then they come to you and you fix it. That's the system and the hierarchy that's always worked. And the hierarchy in AEW clearly hasn't been working. It still isn't working. It's completely out of control. I know that just a few weeks ago, they put those new talent relations departments in place. But frankly, it feels too late at this point. And this has been bubbling. This is really, think about it. This has been bubbling for a while. We don't know the real circumstances as to why Cody Rhodes left AEW. Might have been money. Might have been looking at people like CM Punk going, wait a minute, I helped build this company and I'm not getting the respect that he is. This is BS. Now, frankly, in my opinion, at the time, CM Punk was a bigger star. and had done more business for AEW, better business in terms of ratings, etc., than Cody Rhodes had. But right now, Cody Rhodes is in WWE whilst he's on the shelf. He's a huge star. And frankly, he's going to be the favourite to beat Roman Reigns for the Undisputed Universal Championship. He's probably the favourite to win the Royal Rumble right now. Clearly, there's something going on in AEW, and it's not very good. And it's leading to the point now where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, possibly 8 people suspended. Another person who's your world champion about to be leaving the company because fists are flying backstage. It's complete insanity. Now, Dave Meltzer is also reporting, and this is really a key aspect of this too. Dave Meltzer is reporting, quote, there were neutral parties who saw everything, and their versions are likely going to determine how this all plays out. Now, reportedly, and this is a rumor, but reportedly, one of the people to actually determine how this did play out was actually AEW's chief legal officer, Mega. And if that is the case, then we could see a determination about all of this very, very quickly. And I think that's ultimately why I think that we could hear something about CM Punk's future by the end of today. It's because, frankly, if she's the chief legal officer and she's in it and she knows the legality of what they can and can't do, then CM Punk might be given a bit of an ultimatum at some point later today, or maybe he's already been given it. You have to do this and you can stay. If you don't, you're gone. And I think that probably, I don't know CM Punk personally, but if the stories about him are accurate, he could probably be gone by the end of today. And it's wild. It's absolutely wild. And it's just the latest development. It's just the latest chapter in what is an ever-evolving and disintegrating story, which is this faction warfare that has consumed AEW. So that's the latest news regarding all of it, is everyone you see on the screen right there is suspended and won't be at Dynamite tonight. And again, even the biggest news, possibly about Punk leaving, that's barely even been confirmed yet. Whether or not it is, well, I don't know. So be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner. I am sure we will speak about this again, possibly even today, once we get the latest news on it. But I'll speak with you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.